So hopefully this is going to be like the audio is going to be good or decent enough so you can hear me. So this is for who I'm going to this is for specific someone. I'm not going to really name who they are. Um but this is kind of a refinement of a chart reading specifically with our north node south node placement. I'm actually going to share my screen here. One second here. Where is that one here? Sometimes I forget how to do these things. Oh, wait a sec. Share window. Okay. All right. Um, so with this chart, we've already kind of gone through it I already told you about what I told you about, but I wanted to go specifically into what this means. So in your North Node, you have conjunct Sirene, Dejanira, Amphitrite, Ganymed, Lucifer, Egeria, and Klytia. So that was a lot more than I actually thought was there. You can probably already see here. I was like, oh, I totally missed that one. So based on we're going to go through this step by step, and I'm going to go through each one. As I look up Ganymede, so Ganymede is the asteroid referring to like the cupbearer. He was the cupbearer to Zeus. He was actually kind of taken out of his own free will, kind of, sort of. Like it's regarding like service. It's sort of not just service, probably like also unwanted service, um, where it might be resentment part of it. Because I mean, you have your North Node in Libra, and Libra tends to help others usually when there's an even equal balance sort of payment. So that's similar to the Ganymede asteroid here. But what Ganymede adds here is when it comes to your North Node placement, specifically because it is, how do you call this? It is like destiny, well, not destiny, like your path forward. We talked about how the North Node is a person's uh, path that they can't see ahead of them. It's kind of the opposite, not opposite, but along with the South Node, because the South Node is what you bring from your past lives. North Node is basically where now you're kind of starting fresh, like you're being called, your soul wants to evolve, wants to do something a little bit more different. When I say a little bit, is because you want to take in from the South Node what there is, like from your past lives, the skills you have from those lives, mainly skills or things that are positive attributes of yourself into the new direction. So Ganymede also basically, I'm going to just say it out there. So Ganymede is a usefulness, which ties in with the Libra placement as well. Ganymede is also innocence, naivete. Uh, he's again cupbearer. It's a cupbearer syndrome, which is like I'm going to help you. I'm just gonna. It's almost sacrificial. It's like almost like a sacrifice. He's also about being a trophy wife. That trophy is sort of like, ugh, it's all about charm, flattery. It's about affection. Um, I believe that Ganymede is also where there's issues with like if you have someone who's like like a daddy, it's like, oh my god, he's old enough to be my father. That's the feeling of Ganymede, whatever. But it's also shadow trigger stuff, like triggering of shadow, which is age related stuff. It's like it has a lot to do with age. So feeling young, this is the whole thing. But trying to feel young is kind of the path you're in. You're kind of looking to learn how to kind of take care of yourself a little bit more. Be kind of not be in charge, not so much in being in control, but rather letting go of that control. Because in past lives, you were in control. You were the leader. You were assertive. It was Aries, right? So here, you might experience it's like, oh, I have to help others. I have to be there for others. So that's service. But at the same time, it's like, no, there's a resistance to it. And North Node usually means if we resist something, a lot of times that's what we're going to be called to do, which is or what our soul wants. This is also Ganymede is also about intoxicating beauty, right? You appear that way too. You're starting to learn that, where you just kind of take care of yourself. Um, Specific gifts of beauty, that's very Libra. Uh, Also insecurity again with one's youth, so that might be an issue as well. Um, Not saying you're going to get kidnapped or abducted, but you know, not necessarily literally. But remember, astrology is a language of probability. So um, it could be that you are kidnapped in a way that you're taken away from your own sense of freedom, right? That's very Libra compared to Aries, right? So for Aries, that kind of direction is kind of like, I lose my autonomy, right? Um, it's also about other things like maybe it's the service industry and servitude, servants, maybe forced labor. We don't know, but if you've had that experience, that means there's a part of you that wants to not necessarily be. We're not trying to say that the soul wants to be in forced labor or unwanted service, but it's more about what that really means for you. Okay? Again, this is also about the daddy issue stuff. Any sort of daddy issues, this is part of that, or kind of like related to pederasty. I don't know if you've heard of pederasty, pederasty. I don't know, pederasty. It's basically, it almost sounds like pedophile. It's not that. It's older, younger relationships, specifically same sex. But this, I don't think this applies to you. So, but yeah, there's also entertainment here, being the entertainer, being entertainer or being entertained. Something to do with dancing. This is something to do with entertainment and dancing. So like a dancing girl for you in this case, or go-go girl. I don't know if there's such a thing, but go-go boys. But also had a lot to do with souvenirs. So I don't know if you get souvenirs, if you like, if you're starting to, or you're being called to look at the little things and seeing, appreciating the prize from things, prize trinkets, kind of those things, pebbles, trophies, those kind of things. Um, this also has something to do with sheep herding. I'm not sure if that's something for you, but something to do a lot with youth, right? Because this ties in with the Libra sign. The girl next door, possibly. Um, Offerings, so libation is the term libation, like offerings to a deity or some sort of person. Again, that could be also symbolic, not necessarily actual, not exactly that in that regard, or not exactly in that way. There's also mental attraction. Maybe you're now being called to leave more of a sexual part of yourself and more towards mental attraction, mental connections, mental love, so to speak, more about intellect. Um, this also has a lot to do with chance and fortune telling. Maybe this also has a lot to do with demisexuality. I don't know if you've heard of this term. But yeah, this also has a lot to do with games. Um, any sort of games, specifically like kids games, like I saw here, like knucklebones, scatterjacks, jackstones, five stones. You know that it's like that ball with the you bounce the ball and you get as many of the I think the jack. I don't know what they're called. They look like X's. I don't know. And then finally, it's all to do with also dexterity or cheating. Not necessarily cheating per se, like cheating, maybe general cheating, meaning like kind of to get through, kind of like that's part of Libra, where it's like Libra doesn't really cheat, but they kind of Libra knows how to manipulate through being kind of passive. This is the energy of Libra. Okay. Let's see what else is here. Because it's in the eighth house, this is still your health. So we're going to go a little bit into medical here. So erogenous tones, libido, puberty. I'm not sure if that affected you. Maybe you were transformed. This is the eighth house. It's a lot to do with transformation. But again, dexterity, mental agility, those kind of things, in the brain as well. So if you're going through things, experiencing transformations through those things, like also hormones is part of that as well, hormone molecules. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say here include like erections, but kind of, it's part of that. But also like pleasure, the pleasure area of the brain. I think it's called the ventral tegmental area. Okay. Mm, Now we go into Lucifer. So Lucifer, and this is a kind of a heavy thing, especially for people who are raised very religious. So Lucifer, let me go here. Lucifer is about duality and separation, because Lucifer, if you know from being raised, probably raised Catholic, Lucifer was kicked out of heaven. So the symbolism behind that is in the story. It's a lot to do with pride, hubris, being power hungry, but also being misunderstood or misconstrued. It has a lot to do with also megalomania. Um, so in this case, maybe the issue would be that because of the transition from your Aries to Libra, this sort of axis with the nodes, this is saying that whatever sort of like position you were in, maybe a leadership position, or maybe you were like the top of things, you always like winning. There's a there's that sense of grandiosity as well that comes from that. So you're learning how to deal with grandiosity, over ambition, megalomania. In this case, who ties in with the Libra thing, which is beauty, grace. Um, so it's going to go back and forth here. Okay, so it also has a lot to do with extreme identification or disidentification with your unique role, or uniqueness and your role. Self love, which is a lot like Aries. Um, Envy, hatred, resentment, falling from grace, meaning that maybe there's disconnections, or you feel kind of like, so tying this to Ganymede, I can see where it's like the whole, if you can feel it, you know what I'm talking about. It's that Libra energy of like, um, either you're connected or okay. So, all right. So there was a bit of a cutoff there. I'm only recording this every half hour. It's a thing with Google Meet. But anyway, so going back to the Lucifer thing, it ties in back to the Libra Aries axis. Um, Again, separation or connection. So duality that ties in with the Libra energy, which is like you and me. But there's something about Libra where it's like there's a part where there can be false humility. It's like, oh, poor me. Libra, I know that energy of like, it's all right, but it's not all right. There's resentment through the Libra energy if we're not conscious about it. Um, Potential also for psychosis and self-deludedness, but that's kind of part of it. Um, right. So again, it's about self. What do you call this? Self aggrandizing. Like it's like I'm so good, I'm better than you, kind of thing. There's that thing where if you go through this, this huge hubris and sort of narcissism, there's a shadow to that. There's a good thing about the shadow, which is when we embrace confidence. It's really the gift of narcissism, um, confidence and certainty, self-certainty, knowing what you want, knowing more, right? So that's part of that. You do have your sun conjunct Pluto, so a lot of that is also part of that, because we want to sometimes be, us Sun Pluto Libra people, we want truth and we want genuineness, and when we don't get it, depending on the sign, of course, but I mean, I'm not saying depending on the sign, but we have this feeling of like we just know because we know what it's like to go through hell. It's almost like, come on, let's get a move on. Like it's power. It's really rooted in power. Um, Another part of this Lucifer thing is that there's going to be some sort of, ostracism, being misunderstood, like I said earlier. There's also like sort of lamentation, maybe self-pity as well, sorrow, being superior or inferior. Um, there's so many things about this one because it's about power. It's about also possibly like when I say rape, I'm not going to say this as like a bad thing. I'm just saying that there's always a probability when it comes to these things. I'm not saying so. It's. I think there's a reason why we come to this life as guarded, specifically because it's like we don't want to be misused and abused, and so there's an issue of that whole Pluto thing. Pluto is rape, right? It's misuse of power. It's disempowerment or empowerment, depending on where consciousness leads us. Like Sun and Pluto conjunction, people, we learn to work with the energy of Pluto so that the ego continuously like rips apart and it just kind of like we kind of lose it. So, and I'm pretty sure you know this. We already talked about this in our first session. So there's also extremes, cardinal extremes. Again, that's a Pluto thing. So you're learning. This is the funny thing about placements in the north nodes and north node and south node. A lot of stuff coincide with the other parts of our lives, but like for example, all this stuff beside your north node, they're all kind of showing me the general what would seem like the general interpretation of the Sun Pluto conjunction or placement. This north node is getting more specific with that. So you are here to learn all that stuff. There's also attachment. Lucifer also represents attachment to materialism or freedom from materialism. There's also mockery, magic, acceptance, or resistance, potential for more than showing the way, shedding light, darkness, shadow, bringing awareness, ambition, reputation, manipulation, seduction, sexual power, temptations, this paradise on earth, earthly desires, lust rather than appreciation, egoic versus genuine beauty, light versus dark duality. You get the point, right? Um, so a lot of it is to do with that story that he had. He was banished, he was dethroned. So a lot of it has a lot to do with that as well. It could also be that there's something related to things that are diving, like skydiving, cliff jumping, extreme sports, hang gliding, paragliding, kayaking, any sort of extreme sports, bungee jumping, also hurling, things that you hurl, things like hurling sports like baseball, softball, discus throw, lacrosse, any sort of climbing sports, because that's Lucifer, trying to climb back up, right, into holiness, into divinity. So any sort of climbing sports is related to this as well. Any act of going up, climbing a ladder, ambition, you get that? So it's like, that makes sense, right? So shiny objects as well, because he likes earthly things, something to do with shiny objects. So it could be gemstones, metals, any sort of shiny stuff. Beauty and cosmetics is also part of this, of course. Makeup, uh, separatist movements, genocide, autocratic. This is more around the political stuff. But it also could include psychopath and sociopath. So you might be transforming through the experience of encountering people who are psychopaths or sociopaths, or also megalomaniacs, narcissists, all those kind of things. But again, when we point our fingers, this is the shadow. When we point our fingers, three point back at us. That's the shadow. So we have to embrace that part of ourselves that is narcissistic, meaning confident. That's the one word I can think of. That's that's the gift behind narcissism. So that way we don't attract that as often, or we get used to it. Just like, okay, it's about, Aaron talks about this too. Any sort of shadow work stuff, we have to embrace the darkness. We have to embrace the opposites that we see. Any resistance, any disowned, rejected, for, all those kind of things, aspect of ourselves, when we embrace aspects of it, or at least we embrace the gifts behind it, then that becomes less of an effect on us. Bullying as well as part of this one, name calling, being an outcast as well, persecution and prosecution, demons and demonizing. That's part of Lilith. Lilith is like Pluto, so it ties in with the whole demonizing thing. When people kind of see you as like, they make you bad, or you make others bad, either way. Uh, let's see. We're gonna go back to that one, and we're gonna go into then Amphitrite. Amphitrite is about freedom. We talked about this before. She was kind of questioning whether she wanted to be chased by Poseidon, right? So she's like, no, what are you doing in my territory? So she's very much like mysterious. There's a mystery about her, hard to read or playing hard to get. Heavy angry emotions, strong emotions, complaining attraction or magnetism, romantic persuasion and pursuits, conquest, escaping and escapism. She's like Neptune, by the way. Avoidance, romantic attachment or detachment, rejections, persuasions, attachment to being single, self-preservation, freedom. Again, back to the Pluto thing, right? Ruling authority and sovereignty, fish in the sea. There's a lot of fish in the sea, because it's also about being like a queen. It's very much a Libra thing. You notice this, the theme here, it's all kind of connected. Long held virginity or virgins is part of this, chastity, marriage proposals, bride and or grooms rather, thresholds, moving from one place to another. So transitions, kind of like that, crossing over to like marriage or, you know, you, me. That's part of the whole, again, the Aries to Libra thing. You're like, my autonomy. So a lot of it is rooted in autonomy. And she's also, because she's in the water, there's something to do with like sort of spindles or any type, something that spins. She had, what is this? She was seen in the portrayed or depicted in paintings as having a spindle or something like that. So something to do with spinning, meaning like you spin me right round. When you say, it's like you're going crazy. It's like, what do you want? That's Amphitrite. But also pincers of all kinds, so tweezers, pliers, crimpers, clamps, tongs, because this means like defensiveness. It's a bit of Cancer feel here, like the crab, right? But still, like defensiveness, protection. That's the Pluto thing. Um, Something to do with the seas, of course, bodies of water, ocean floors, dolphins, seals, seahorses, crabs, anything with water, tidal waves, currents, especially crashing water. So because it's very strong emotions, right? Wave crashes, abrasions, erosions, right? It's almost like Amphitrite is saying, you come to me, you're going to chase me, and I'm going to make you change. That's also kind of a Libra thing, right? It's like, okay, you want me? Okay, let's go with it. I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to make you think you're in charge, but not really. Or the opposite, right? Because of your South Node placement, you're in charge. You want to be sovereign. You want to retain your sovereignty, your sense of identity, your sort of, I know what I want. Being single, all that stuff. So it's all connected to all this stuff. Anything to do with water, shipwrecks, submarines, water turbulence, marine transportation. That's more of a political stuff. Or at least, um, let's go back to that one. Then the next one is Dejanira. Sounds like if you took French, déjeuner. It's like, I believe it's like lunch or something. Um, let's see how much time we have here. Okay, so Dejanira is imposed and toxic love of marriages or marriages. She was the wife of Hercules. So she was very like demure, kind of like she's like the alpha magnet, which is like the damsel in distress. Demure women love magic, belief or disbelief, and disbelief, blind faith, blind love, gullibility, insidious or destructive unions or love that kills, right? Manipulation, pacifist, fighting, battling, stereotype female roles, right? Demure, uh, sure, like that. And I know that that's like whoa. It's for you. I think it's like what the fuck, But what it means is that you're being called to kind of be. Your soul wants to be a little softer, right? Still maintain your sovereignty, your sense of self worth. Excuse me, your independence, right? But in this case, kind of like being open to partnership, being open to, you never know. Not maybe it's not exactly Mr. Right now, and kind of getting away from that unconscious, like, behaviors of like sex, right? And you know what that's like, because the reason why Scorpio does that is because it's especially for younger people, like when you're in your teens, Scorpio wants to experiment with that, but the older you get, the more you realize, oh, I want more meaning, right? Catharsis. We talked about this before. I said catharsis is so important because it's not just physical connections, beyond that, beyond death. This is why Scorpio embraces death and risk taking, right? But again, this time you're being called to be softer. I mean, your sun is in the ninth house with Pluto. That's more Sagittarian risk-taking sort of thing. But Sagittarius, unlike Aries, Sagittarius is open to relationships. It's open to friendships, open to connections, because it knows how to be connected to people. So friendships are important to Sagittarius as well. So what that means for you is, even though you have that Scorpio thing, it's in but your Pluto is in Sagittarius. It's like a mix of softness of Scorpio. Okay? Not to say that Scorpio isn't soft. It actually is. It just wants to defend it. Because it's like, what? Right? There's also manipulation as well with Dejanira, the art of war. So toxic love, art of war. So this guy's kind of like, when I say art of war, I think what this means is like you have to kind of time and choose kind of choose and time, like you pick your battles, so to speak, right? You could also include accidental death or killing. I'm not saying that you are going to go through that, but the more conscious we are, the more we see it's like, oh, the more these probabilities can be sort of self-fulfilling, meaning like if it's from the ego, then most likely I find it with the charts, I find that there's something going on there where it's like this is a soul journey to learn. But once we come back into more consciousness and awareness and presence, we start to kind of become aware of signs. So the probability of something happening, whether it's positive or negative, is likely to be more like from coming from a sort of more neutral sort of place. So that way you're not, you know what I mean? Like it's our energy, right? So going back to this, so she's Dejanira also represents any sort of poisoned things, imposed forced marriages, interrupted or canceled weddings. Rape is also part of this one again. Hercules raped her, or rather, yeah, it's weird. Dejanira is like the very super soft, so stereotypical female. You know, she's also about kidnapping or bride stealing customs. She's tied to that as well. Violence and abuse. Also to do with shirts, something to do with shirts or stained shirts, colored shirts. Um, Funeral pyres, wagons, potions, elixirs, love potions. That's one thing as well. So something to do with potions, or yeah, something to do where you make someone fall in love with you, right? So that's the whole manipulation thing. And the love magic is part of that as well. I talked about earlier. I didn't get to talk about the health stuff. We're gonna go back to that after. Hopefully, I remember it. The next one is Egeria. So Egeria is, I totally forgot. Egeria is a prophecy, sacred knowledge and change. Um, The sacredness, purity, messages, higher knowledge, wisdom, inspiration, downloads, information, wisdom, okay, controversial and challenging facts, um, possibly inappropriate or inappropriate stuff, inspirational connection versus emotional disconnection. Because if it's, and what I mean by inspired in this case is when it's more guided, it's more inspired, not what we were when I was going through the training today with Victor. He talked about the whole like impulses. There's nothing wrong with impulse, but when it goes too much, where it's just like it's all about impulse, it's all about below thought. It's very, we're not evolving. Curiosity and assertion is part of this as well. Natural connections, purity again, divination is part of this as well. Mysteries, messages, prophecies, prophets, oracles, oracular abilities, consorts, advice and advisors, counseling, laws, rituals, ceremonies, counterparts, and twins, something to do with duality. Ties in with the Lucifer. You see how this all connected? It's weird. It's interesting how the asteroids come together, right? How this ties into the whole Egeria thing with the what do you call that? The axis, the Libra Aries axis is Aries is fire. So you carry those gifts with you of like inspiration, intuition as well as part of that. Hmm. So it's also about anti-system knowledge. I put that as anti-system means against the grain, against societal. That's the independence that's um, even Libra wants that too with Aries because it's all these are what called it positive energies. It's meaning like it's more expressive than impressive, so to speak. Like it's an extroverted energy, so to speak. Like it's out there. It's more active rather than passive, so to speak. Um, yeah. So the duality is part of this one as well. Deliveries of any kind, childbirth or childbirth, water births, birthing pool, midwifery, midwives, youthfulness and youth that ties them back to Ganymed. Young, well, I would say young men. So I'm not sure if you were drawn to young men or rather maybe younger than you. I don't know, or the look at least of youthfulness, right? Sacredness, spiritual writing, and authorship. This has something to do here with automatic writing. Something to do with being natural. Tree branches, roots, orchards, woodlands, woodlots, thickets, and stands. Nature hikes, mountain climbing, hunting, wildlife, water. Well, now this goes into like bodily fluids, lubrication, lubricants. So it kind of ties in with the sex thing, right? The Pluto thing. It's also about a bit of sexual energy. The Scorpio thing with eighth house here with Libra as well, sexual, right? Hydration or dehydration. That's a bit of a Libra thing there. Properties of any liquid, spiritual or medical properties of liquid or messages, information, sources of nutrition. Um, yeah, so he was basically about just connection, but also like the way I see how Egeria is she's about like the flow, like water, but just messages that way. Like messages when I see message, you know what I mean? Like connection, inspiration, psychic abilities, right? Or oracle abilities, prophetic abilities. Very water, also fire, which ties in with your sun Pluto placement with your Mercury. Absolutely. Okay. Traditional knowledge versus new controversial wisdom as well. So she's kind of like Uranus, but at the same time, it's like she stands her ground. She's like Vesta. She's like also like Diana or Artemis, but also like Neptune. So prophetic abilities, all that stuff, right? Inspirational. Then there's Klytia, of course. We did this one before where we had Klytia. Remember the Klytia is like this energy of like sacrifice, like unrequited love. She's like loving in vain. It's very much Libra too. Loving for the sake of love. Love, love, love. Being jilted by lovers, perceived cheating, like, it's like, mm, destined loneliness, possibly devoted love. I'm not saying that you're going to be lonely. Okay, I'm not saying that, but if it's about love for the sake of love, it's no longer real. That's where the Pluto thing comes in, right? It's like, because Pluto in Sagittarian destination, you guys want, unlike for myself, right? Pluto Libra, Pluto in Sagittarian people tend to want absolute philosophy, beliefs, yes, wisdom, inspiration, being active, traveling, language. Um, what else is there? Expansion, growth, opportunities. Right. This is a very Sagittarian thing, but because it's Pluto, it's intensified. It's kind of made it sort of like a very focused energy of like, let's go into this. Let's get serious with the business. Let's get serious with the beliefs. So it's kind of like serious, like it also ties in with like spirituality, but also doctrine. So that's the thing about Sagittarius. So it ties in with this one as well. Right? She's like very much like devoted. That's devotion. That's Klytia. She's all about devotion. She's like she represents the pious disciple. That's her energy. So unrealistic love, infatuation, actually extreme infatuation, absolutism, right? Head over heels. Absolute love corrupts absolutely. In this case, not power. Absolute love corrupts absolutely. The jealous type, obsessive love, devotion, like I said before. Whether we leave it or it feels like we're abandoning. We're abandoned by it. It also represents divorce, no fault divorce. Like apparently California is a no fault state. I didn't know. I'm not sure. But what I mean is like things just like when people just kind of what do you call this? When you kind of just not fall. What is that word? What is that phrase? When you kind of like drift apart. That's typical of Clytia as well because Helios left her. She wasn't really into her, but she was still into him. She was like she worshipped him so much, right? Idolatry. That's also Clytia, right? I mean, she's also about love triangles, um, jealousy, ex-lovers, tragic love stories, tragedies, crimes of passion. That's more legal stuff here. Again, back to the whole idolatry, or rather adultery, possibly. I did not put that here, but extramarital sex and affairs, or ties in back to the cheating thing. I think it was Ganymed, right? So, but it's also patriotism is part of this one. Loyalty to one's country, lackey, pedestals. Like when you have a pedestal, you get like step, kind of like your doormat, basically. But she's also about flowers, right? Especially called the sunflowers or heliotrope. That's the flower of Clytia. Heliophilia, the love of the sun. I don't know if you like the heat or love the sun, but yeah. So there's that. Mm, then there's of course Sirene. We're gonna go backwards after this one. They're going to go into the eighth house stuff, which is the health. So Sirene is seduction, lust, attraction, unsatisfied urge or desire, heart's desire, all-consuming love, loveless, passion, suck the life out of. When you can't drink or eat because of all that stuff. It's very Clytia as well. Temptations, um, mockery, which was a Lucifer thing. Sexual power, that's a Lucifer thing as well. Attractive being, sexual manipulation, also Lucifer. Sexualization and objectification, imagination, curiosity, lulling to sleep, right? So when Sirene is the one when you're lulling to sleep, you're trying to attract them, you're trying to lure them in with you. So it's very much it is seduction, but it's also about rejection. So people who resist that, or your resistance to love itself. Again, your autonomy thing from your past lives back into Libra. I mean, going into Libra. So it feels like, ugh, it's like, mm. So how do you work with that, right? freedom and escaping, not shining, shame and anguish, bottled up anger, resentment, vengeance, alcohol, drug and consumption, addictions, interpretation of perception through senses, unconscious versus conscious, perceptibility, climax is orgasm or post-orgasmic state, yelping, like, oh, oh, that's yelping. Alarms and sirens, of course, alarm naturally. Yelping because it's calling out, right? But it's like you're trying to convince other people that not you, but when that's a Libra thing as well. When Libra tries to fake it and says, "I need help. I need to." You're so good. It's very much. There's a seductive energy about Libra as well. Shame, legacy, trophies, gaslighting is part of this as well, which with Sirene. Singing in songs, musical instruments, so anything, any string instruments, but also flutes, wind instruments, probably loud versus soft music. Because when the sirens tried to convince, who was it? Agamemnon? No, Jason and the Argonauts. When he was tied to the mast of the ship, and he had to be tied to it because otherwise he would be lured by the song. But then he also had his ears covered or something like that. So something to do with loud or soft music. Lullabies, headphones, earplugs, beeswax. Beeswax because of the wax earplugs, right? Oh, because they had his ears covered with beeswax. So that's part of the story. Flowers, ropes, cords, seat belts. Okay, we're digressing a little bit there, but something to do with positive and negative poles of magnets. Magnetism makes sense with the whole polarity that with Libra and Aries, right? Uh, Something to do with whales, orcas, dolphins singing, succubi and vampires, short-term marriages. That's the whole Klytia thing. It's funny. Shotgun weddings, eloping, cliff jumping, bungee jumping, extreme sports. Oh, back to Lucifer. Um, Distortions, optical illusions, moonlights or silver moons and moonlight, fogs, mirages. Um, Reflection, refraction, hazes, fogs, again, like I said, escape routes, social corruption, birds, owls, and flight, basilisks, snakes, serpents, jackals, predation and preying, and predator versus prey, feathers and feather plucking, scales, skin and flaying, wings and tails, hybrids, mixed breed animals, biracial people. Ah, this one ties in. I guess you see this is funny because you're meant to go through this biracial, but you're also possibly because it's in an eighth house placement, maybe you're transforming through experiencing relationship with people who are also mixed. Impose enforced service, psychopomps, which is like ushers, guides, those who guide the dead. That is Sirene as well. Aromatic scents, hunger, starvation, mirrors, mock exams, mockery, mock objects. That's the Lucifer thing because he was being mocked. He was her falling. It's like you who rule these lands have now fallen so low. That's Lucifer. So we're gonna go into the eighth house stuff, which is the health stuff, which is usually when we go into this sixth house, but because it's eighth house, your north node is in the eighth house. Oh no, Cyrene is not in the eighth house. Cyrene is seventh. We're gonna go back into Egeria. So how this ties in with the seventh house placement of these Klytia and Cyrene is that it affects you on a physical and subconscious level. When there's a disconnection, when there's a sort of like escape, when you're trying to attach yourself too much to a relationship, and then you transform through maybe there's rejection or you reject them, and you learn from that, and you're like, oh, right, feels like what am I doing, kind of thing, right, or what is going on here, right, um, and really learning from that. But how that affects you on a physical and also subconscious level is, let's see here. So Egeria rules bodily fluids. Um, water in the body, brain, any sort of water in the body. Interstitial fluids, I forgot what that means. Plasma, hydration or dehydration. Yeah. Pineal gland, also mouth, lips, tongue, oral cavity, mouth, larynx. Because she was like prophetic. She was like a guide. So laryngitis as well, larynx here, possibly epiglottis, esophagus, lungs, hypoxia or asphyxia, breathing related stuff, maybe dizziness as well, numbness, tingling, trouble concentrating, maybe asthma, I don't know, rupture of membranes, I don't know what that is. That's probably extreme. There's a bunch of stuff here, like rupture of membranes, amniorexis, water breaking. Oh, this is more about pregnancy stuff. Doesn't apply here, but if it does in the future, just letting you know, it's something to do with birth. Um, Prematurity with deliveries. Um, Either message or baby. What is the delivery? Oh, okay, due to smoke, maybe inhalation. So maybe. Oh, wow, that ties into what you told me. If you come across people who like to smoke, and you kind of, that's be careful of that stuff because that means it affects you on a physical level, but also subconsciously. This is the eighth house. This is still health. Okay. Um, Dejanira. Dejanira is also about toxins. So this goes back into this whole thing again. It's about toxins, about toxicity in the body. What is in the blood actually as well in this case. Doxemia or bloodstream infection, BSIs, bacteremia or septicemia, bloodborne pathogens, pneumonia, meningitis, sepsis, septic shock, endocarditis or osteomyelitis, fever, chills, hypotension, not hypotension, low blood pressure, multiple organ dysfunction syndrome, maybe, viremias, fungiemias, protosemia, gram-positive bacteria, respiratory tract. Again, back to the lungs. This is also tied into the air that is Libra, which is funny. But let's look at your eighth house cusp is on Libra. Whereas Libra rules the kidneys though, but there's more to it than that. A lot to do with the blood stuff and lungs as well as part of this one. Body temperature abnormalities, heart rate, blood pressure, white blood cell count. So blood, lungs, right? High blood pressure or low blood pressure. I would say low blood pressure is more in this case. But that ties into what was said about what we read about with Egeria. Amphitrite, I believe, has a lot to do with also water. Halotherapy, moaning of any kinds. Okay, back to the orgasm thing. Okay. So this is part of that as well. So maybe the blood pressure or hypotension might be something to do with that, with the blood and erections, or rather like excitement, nipples, erections, nipples, clitoris, vaginal walls, lubrication, sexual abstinence is part of this one, right? Condoms, also vaccinations is part of this as well, because she's about production, right? She didn't really want Neptune or Poseidon in this case to be like, why stay away, right? Birth control is part of this one as well. She also rose thighs, legs, and feet because she is about dancing. She was dancing one time in the mythology, and Poseidon saw her, and he was like, "Ooh, I gotta chase her." Defense mechanisms or the immune system is part of this one. Um, Respiratory tracts goes back to nasal cavity, hairs, cerumen, which is earwax, acidic fluids, gastric juice, urine, vaginal secretions, acidic fluids, okay, lysozyme, which is in tears, sweat, and saliva. All defense mechanism related stuff. Any part of the body that has defense mechanism, this is part of it. Um, White blood cells is part of that as well, or B cells, or is it T cells as well? I think is part of, yeah, T lymphocytes or T cells. Yeah, all immune responses, right? Lucifer, going back to Lucifer. So he rules the mouth, the beard, mustache, liver, inebriation, liver failure. I forgot what inebriation is. Something to do with the liver for sure. Earlobes, calves, tongue. Well, not penis, but I would say clitoris as well. Bones, chest, heart, aspiration, pneumonia, nausea, vomiting, tremor, anxiety, and respiratory depression, metabolism. The Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, hemodialysis, oxygen therapy, hypoglycemia, electrolyte imbalance, gag reflex, because of the sexual thing, right? But gag reflex, like throwing up, right? Ties in. Metabolism is part of that. They have blood pressure, metabolism, they're kind of tied. Um, okay, what else is there? And finally, Ganymede, back into that one. Back to the erogenous zones again. Yeah, we talked about that actually. Libido is part of that. Pleasure, dexterity. We already talked about that earlier. But you see how it all kind of connects, right? How it's all this connection with Libra, right? The Libra energy is very much like that. It's like the jealousy stuff, the loving of the love, or obsession with love, maybe escaping because, especially with the axis here, not just Libra itself, but the axis with the nodes, it's like loss of autonomy, feeling like you're misunderstood because you want to be this way. And then your relationship's kind of like, and this is where you transform through. So anything that I've mentioned to you, combining it all has a lot to do with Ganymede, which is like unwanted, sort of like helping others when you're just like, because of your autonomy. Lucifer is the same thing, being, kind of like sticking to your own, what kind of like really like makes you feel strong and independent, but also a lot of it is the hubris and also the ego and narcissism and megalomania, all that stuff. That's a Pluto thing. Um, but Amphitrite is also part of that whole like, I don't want to lose my freedom. I don't want to lose my sense of self and like my independence. Dejanira is kind of like the same thing, except actually, no, Dejanira is the opposite, which is like, I'm all about giving it for you and to you, and I'm going to manipulate this. I'm going to make you like me. Right? And then Egeria is like um, learning from those by kind of like being the guide for other people. It's almost like now it's like I'm here to help you and be of service to you, even though there's a part of you that doesn't want it. So there's this thing that you have to learn how to balance being able to help people, being there, but not losing your autonomy, right? Being in a relationship doesn't necessarily mean you lose yourself in a relationship because it's like you're whole already. You have to find someone who understands that as someone who's whole. You don't come into a relationship half-assed and half empty. That doesn't make sense. It's not even true. Right? Just about going back to realizing there's that, that truth within us. Now I wanted to go back into your south node because I noticed that there were three extra asteroids. We did go through Hygiea, which is about we talked about it before, not kind of being the opposite of not being, Hygiea is about hygiene, right? Um, but we did talk about Phaethon, which is like risk taking, right? Let's see if I can go into detail with Phaethon because this is in the second house. So recklessness with money, recklessness, maybe guilt, debt, maybe going into debt, um, excess or lack of energy, or lack, in this case, energy to make money or to see money as something that is just a tool, and sort of like Let me see if I can reword that properly. It's about zeal and energy. So how you put your energy into something that you really want to do and you're being bold about it. You're used to doing that stuff. So, but because it's in retrograde, it's almost like you do the opposite. You kind of doubt that energy. So there is self-doubt here. There's like you doubt your ability to work with money. Right? It was just all kind of like maybe you go into bribery as well. Not to say that you do. I'm just saying there's a possibility, right? So there's you also probably get warnings about it, like signs that it's like ooh, right? And there's depression is also included in this one. Um, extreme changes when it comes to money because he's about extreme climate changes. That's extremes. That's Phaethon. Again, risk taking as well. So maybe there's like either you have a lot of money or you don't have a lot of money. It's kind of like extremes. Um, celibacy is part of this, being single. So when it comes to the second house, it's almost like you want to, you're used to being kind of like spending your money all for yourself, right? Um, but again, I could be wrong with that one. Kidnapping is a part of this one. I don't know why, but it is. So, but in this case, it's more like because it's in retrograde, it's almost like maybe things are taken from you, or maybe through the issues you had in past lives, right? It's like this is why you're kind of you want to be autonomous. It's like I worked hard for this. Why are you taking from me? Right. So that's kind of kidnapping thing. You're kidnapping money, or you're or your self worth as well. It feels like that. Consent is part of this as well. Just like they didn't really ask you. So loss and death of money or self worth is part of this whole thing. Um, being also chastised or chastising other people, possibly being reprimanded, or rather, you feel like you're reprimanded. You kind of like, oh, or you reprimand yourself, you chastise yourself, and you're like, oh, I should have been more careful. So in this case, because of the retrograde Phaethon, right? Let's see if their Cernunnos is not retrograde. There we go. Awesome. I just worked on Cernunnos recently. Cernunnos. Cernunnos is how they say it. That's how I heard it. Cernunnos was this is a beautiful one. Cernunnos was the god of fertility, the Celtic god of fertility. He was everywhere. He's omnipresent, primordial inner nature. It's about duality. It's about having none or everything. This belief that it's like it's a kind of in between, but between roads where it's like, how do you trust your inner nature? Literally actual nature, being natural. This is why it ties in with the Hygiea thing, where you want to be more natural with things, letting things go where they are, going with the flow. It's very much the Aries energy of being present, and that's very natural, right? But there's a part of you that kind of questions that, and you're hard on yourself because that's you're learning that in this lifetime you have that sun in Scorpio with the Pluto there, which is like Pluto is in this case still serious, but so you're still serious about it. You might be dogmatic about your own beliefs. You might be kind of attached to the outcome still. But with the Scorpio energy, it's a lot to do with money as well, right? It's concerned about financial security, possessional security, material security. It ties in with this second house placement, which is ruled by Taurus. In your past life, you're so used to just kind of like, money is gonna come. I believe this. It's totally fine, you know. But because of, but at the same time, it's like you trust it because you keep it, like you know what to do with money. It's almost like you have this abundance in you, like you understand. It's like it's gonna be abundant. It's gonna be that's totally fine. But it's also you have this sort of like tenacity about being that way. You have this virility, strength, and it's like I'm prosperous. There's fruitful. There's a lot of abundance here. I'm limitless, right? A sense of authority as well as part of this aggressiveness or gentleness. Here in this case, now you're being called to be a little bit more gentle with the north node placement. This is also something to do with pettiness of the ego or dependence or codependence, perception of emptiness or wealth, fullness or hollowness, total acceptance and surrender, non assimilation, cleansing. fasting, dieting, detox, life and death, rebirth and renewals, transition. Okay, it's very much a Pluto thing. Being also in a meditative state as well. Maybe to you, being meditative is sort of natural because he was this. Cernunnos was always portrayed and depicted as this. He's cross-legged, so he's meditating. So he's in a sort of like meditative, or maybe like catharsis. Ties in back to the Scorpio placement of your sun. It's very linked. I love it. Enlightenment, but also the love of animals, maybe connection to animals, love of nature, connecting to nature, sheep, shepherds, flocks, mountains, the wild wilderness, forests, jungles, the outback, maybe lake houses, I don't know, cabins. I don't know if you have that. I don't know if you have that in your family or you want that and you know you can get that. Material wealth, right? Fruits and vegetables, vegetation, something to do with vomiting as well. I'm not saying that you naturally vomit, but I think because of the past life that you maybe you went through something like that, where you probably had conditions regard like in this area of your body, not the stomach but the lung. Maybe not necessarily vomiting, but like excess. Maybe he has a lot of excess stuff. Cernunnos rules abundance, so there could be excess as well. But also something to do with lot to do with deers, right? Stags, deers, anything like that. But also horns, antlers. Other animals included here foxes, badgers, wolves, serpents, snakes, dogs, bulls, rats, boars, trees. Oh, sorry, trees, yeah. But also nature. So it's trees, stones, and rocks, which is funny because I saw earlier with Lucifer as a gemstone, right? So stones and rocks are connected to that as well. Possibly because of Egeria in your north node, you're being called to also, maybe if you use gemstones, I don't know. I do. Also something to do with roses. That kind of ties in with the Libra thing. But rose, I forgot what rose represents. There's different types, and they all represent different things. I forgot. But also rules, Cernunnos also rules torques, or like kind of like chokers, like neck rings, chokers, or necklaces. I don't know. So it kind of ties in with the gemstone as well, right? But it also represents like either being choked by the fear of having very little or poverty or freedom from that, because torques have this sort of like you can lock it but they can be unlocked. It's not permanently in the neck. This is what he was depicted with. He also rules, because of the abundance thing, he rules coins, pouches, bags, pockets, purses, storages as well, banks, bank accounts, investments, commerce, trade, grain, harvest, cornucopia. All those stuff is abundance, right? But also wind instruments. I don't know if you ever played instruments when you were younger. Maybe in this life you did, or in a past life, maybe you did. You played a wind instrument or a brass instrument, specifically like a horn. Bells, possibly. Anything that's animal shaped as well. This has a lot to do with the neck, which kind of ties in with your north node placements with the lungs. Remember we talked about the asphyxiation, lungs, and breathing. That was mentioned there. Also rules Celtic people, any sort of Celtic stuff. I would say that in this case, there's a possibility you might have been, I don't know what asteroids, what other asteroids can fit in here, but if I were to look at it, I bet you there's something to do with that. Maybe you were Celtic in a past life. Welsh, Irish, Scottish, Cornish, um, Bretonish, or Manx. Those are the based on languages, but those are the basic, or maybe you were in Gaul, maybe you were part of the military, because this is all about military forces, territorial expansion. This is part of Cernunnos as well. Underground, subterranean locations, anything odd, maybe oddities or oddly shaped objects. Circus, not sure about circus. Undiscovered areas of the world, unearthed or unlearned, unknown information, knowledge. Travelers, travel agencies, two-way roads, crossroads, doorways, doors, gates. It's all about communication as well. That's Cernunnos. It's all about the flow of transmission of information, but also how things communicate, which ties in with Pluto. How? Because Pluto rules the mycelial network. The mycelial network is a network. It communicates with each other. all the time. Right? It's the oldest organism in this planet. Oldest. That's what I heard. But anyways, so that's why there's a communication there. But you also have the Sagittarius, which is still a bit of a communication. You have Mercury conjunct your Sun, Pluto. So journals, diaries, biographies, Q&As is part of this one. So opposites attract, or opposites, possibly positive, negative polarities, mediation, mediators, arbiters, judges, birth rates, death rates. So that arbiter thing, that mediator thing, that's a Libra thing. So you're being called to take in that ability that you naturally have. You can mediate for other people. Or you can be something that can get to, like, diplomacy, I would say. Life death cycles as well, life and death rates, birth rates and death rates. Well, that's also mean judges. Maybe you were a judge. I don't know. Incarnations, reincarnations, limbo, in between, right? Which is the Libra thing as well, being in limbo, not being indecisive as well. Not saying you're indecisive, but it can lead to that, where it's like maybe you're being called to kind of be in the middle of things and say not taking sides and kind of be more neutral and more objective about things. Cernunnos also, because of limbo, there's also purgatory. So, but also about funerals and funerary rites because of the death thing, wakes, burials, coffins, embalming. I said so, but it also has to do with priests and priestesses, saints, monks, ascended masters, disciples, followers, baptism, exorcism, thanatology, which is the study of death, born again religious people, altars, shamanism, shamans, psychopomps, ushers, guides, angels, angelic guides. You see how it's related to the Egeria thing as well? It's funny, right? Very beautiful. Lucifer is part of that as well. Uh, Amphitrite? No, not really. What else is there? Foster parents, foster care, authority figures, leaders. That's the that's the what is that? Foster care. Oh, kind of like temporary parenting. So that's still okay with Libra because Libra sometimes doesn't is not really connected to relationships are important, but now when it comes to children, I met Libras that they're not really even for myself. It's like, do I want children? It's not really a thing. It's more like we see children as equal. So that's why there's a foster thing, right? But I do have my son in fourth house, so there's a Cancer field. So I do, yeah. Children is kind of a push sometimes. It's like, okay. Authority figures is part of this one. Leaders, bosses, managers, head of organizations. So you probably were a leader of some sort. Could be a priest. Could be, what is it? You were a judge. You're probably some kind of monk. I don't know. A Celtic monk. I don't know. The seasons is also part of this one. Cycles as well. The surroundings and environment. Um, Something to do with flanking maneuvers, ambushes. Flanking. Okay, something to do with flanking because it's about surrounding, right? Being surrounded by, right? So maybe you knew how to be this. It's funny how that ties into the Libra thing because Libras are known for being like, what do you call them? Not specifically just I would call them generals. They know how to give orders and kind of like balance things and kind of like call delegate, right? Um, Anything with twos, so two-headed things, double-sided things. A sword could be paper, it could be anything with pairs, partnerships, couples, twins, triplets. Ties into that. Ties into Libra thing, but it also rules conjoined twins. One of the depictions of Cernunnos is that he was a kind of a what do you call this? He was like polycephaly. Like he was a triplet. There's three parts to him, or rather two parts to him. I forgot what it was. But the reason why that's important, why that is significant, is because there's a Libra thing that's being pulled into, right? Again, we keep talking about the whole thing, but in this case, it's I don't know. Maybe in the past life you were a twin, you were a conjoined twin. I don't know. You don't know that. Or maybe you had a sister or something like that. Maybe you had like it sounds negative, but they call it like a parasitic sort of. not twin, but like a there's a full-bodied one, and there's one that's like attached, that's like not fully born, but you're sharing the same brain. Interesting, right? So, um, I don't know what that how that ties in with the second house placement of Phaethon Hygiea. I'm not sure, but I do know it's something to do with two. So that means you and me kind of thing, which is the Libra energy. Cernunnos also rules addictions or drug dependence. I don't know. I'm not saying that you were into that or maybe in a past life, possibly. Insoluble or insoluble fluid or non-biodegradable objects, plastic. I don't know. That's something to do with not really connected to this one, but it's in the second house. So maybe you're used to working with those kind of things. Insoluble food is basically there's a lot of them. Like corn, for example, that's an insoluble food. I'm actually gonna put it in here. I'm gonna read it to you. Where did I get to? Yeah. Wheat bran, wheat germ, oat bran, beans, lentils, legumes, kidney beans, black beans, garbanzo, edamame, split peas, lima beans, navy beans, white beans, berries, any berries really, even strawberries are part of this. Whole grains, turnips, green peas, okra, spinach, radishes, rutabaga, coconut, cocoa, especially coconut like flakes, cocoa, apples. So any of those things, or flaxseed is also avocados insoluble. That's interesting. Sunflower seeds, potatoes and sweet potatoes are insoluble. That's interesting. Is it even part of the insoluble section? Yeah, it is. Popcorn is part of that too. Pasta, whole grain pasta, passion fruit, almonds, nuts, figs, raisins, prunes, apricots, or dried apricots rather, dried prunes. So those kind of stuff. Anyways, so going back to this, what else do we see here? Spelunking. I don't know if you're into caves, anything that's hollowed, any part of the world that's hollowed. I don't know if you were into that or if you were making money off of that earlier in your life or in a past life. We don't know. Maybe you were a speleologist. Speleologist is the study of caves. It's interesting. I was like, what? Uh, any sort of soluble rock, limestone, chalk, dolomite, marble, salt, gypsum. But that ties in actually with the gem stuff. Remember Cernunnos, we're talking about rocks, right? It ties in with the second house, which is because second house is ruled by Taurus. Taurus likes it's earth related. So like it just likes rocks. That makes sense with the Cernunnos placement here. Phaethon is also part of that as well. Because Phaethon, he was he had to be controlled by Zeus because he was out of like not whack. He was kind of like rebelling because he didn't know his father. There was a sort of emotional sort of like, well, nobody cares. I'm just gonna burn through things. Phaethon actually rules climate change. It's very interesting, right? But heat, what does heat does do to Earth? It makes it into metal. That kind of ties in with the Earth placement here, with not Earth, but the second house, which is Earth ruled by Taurus. It kind of ties in here. Um, how that ties in with Hygeia is I'm not really sure how that ties in with Hygeia. She's still about grains, years of grain, cups, jars, regeneration, cups, water jugs, antiparasitics, medical solutions, diagnoses, regeneration of body organs, cells, snakes, sanitation programs, contaminants, cross contamination, immunity, health and safety of medicine, intellectual. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know how the metal thing comes in here, but something to do with metal surfaces. I don't know. Maybe surfaces like this is where I'm kind of like going off the path here. Hard work. IG also rules hard work and disciplines, so maintenance of good health, but hard work because it's something to do with metal, right? It's just hardness. So I see how there's a bit of a link there. I mean, I've always been this kind of person. I believe that there's always a link to something because I looked at it in my own life. It's like, what is it that I do? I analyze my own experience and then how it shows up in the chart. And I look at the little details, like what did I do? What happened? What did I do? Why did I do this? How did I do this? And I look really back into the details if I, as far as I can remember, and as detailed as I can try to remember it or try to recall. And so, yeah. So, anyways, how that all balances out, you kind of get the. I hope you kind of get the idea where this is going, right? Um, yeah, you were pretty much this like very independent person. Kind of just went with the flow, very natural, very in touch with your nature, which is still Taurus, likes the earth, right? So anything earth related, food, pleasure, um, gemstones, rocks, soil, planting, trees, vegetation. Cernunnos is there too, but it also ties in with the placements of um, Libra as well, because in Libra, like Libra still likes natural things. Um, Aries energy is more about just going in the moment. So now it's kind of like I learned that when it comes to Libra, that's Libra, the Aries Libra polarity is that once it goes through the zodiac, Libra represents pausing and observation. So it's kind of now holding back into those energies and still learning how to be natural. You can still do that, appreciate what but not going into where it's sort of letting go of the negative stuff from the past and kind of, or at least learning from them and going into your shadow, which is very important. This is a very Pluto thing. Um, what else? We talked a little bit about before when it comes to your let's see here. I had to stop recording for a second there because I wanted to make sure I had more time. So okay. So we talked about how there's like the squares to your north node. If anything is square to your north node, if it's the other asteroids are close to it, the squares it counts. They count. So we have another chart here. We have Jupiter is still kind of part of this one, but Jupiter is the one that's square. Ganymede, Lucifer, and Amphitrite. No, Ganymede, Lucifer. So what that means is that um, there's this potential for growth and expansion through communities, but they kind of get in, you kind of experience these, you transform through this experience about Ganymede, Lucifer with pride when it comes to knowing what you want and knowing what you, it's like you know what you need to do, you know what's good for you. But when it comes to service, it's almost like, ugh, I don't want to be of service. There's a part of you that probably transforms through that, or is still probably transforming through that. You're probably going through it and really like you have to kind of isolate yourself away from like communities because it's like, ugh, I don't want to be there. I want to kind of focus on myself a little bit. I want to be independent. There's that pull up, there's that sort of Pluto pull inside of Sagittarius because it wants absolute, it wants perfection, it wants the absolute, like really like genuine or real philosophy, real traveling, real experiences, real expansion, real opportunities, real beliefs, right? And real learning, like real experience, right? So that's why this is one of the this is the Pluto in Sagittarius generation. So with the Lucifer thing going on there with Ganymede, it's almost like, ugh, I can't be of help to other people if I can't help myself. It's almost like there's a part of you that doesn't feels incomplete, maybe, right? And you kind of, but with the Jupiter in Capricorn, it's showing me that it's sometimes you need to, it's funny because Jupiter in Cancer is what you call exalted. It's exalted in Cancer. That means that it feels right at it it's kind of feels right at home. Not really. It's works with Sagittarian energy, right? That's Jupiter. But Jupiter in Cancer is kind of like similar to that. It's exalted, meaning it's in its rise, What that represents is it it feels more grounded in a way, and being able to have a safety net around expansion. It's like contained. Like, that's Cancer, but at the same time, being able to trust that Cancer has that energy of um, security and safety and nurturing. So it's very nurtured. This feeling of like, so Jupiter feels nurtured in that energy, feeling like it can grow more as long as it's being guided and mothered. Now it's the opposite. Saturn, sorry, in Capricorn, it's almost like Jupiter can't really expand because it's almost like it's being judged and limits are being placed on it rather than nurtured. It's kind of like saying, okay, here you go. Just to let you know, watch out before you go out into the world, before you expand, before you do any of these things, before you have your beliefs and all that stuff. Jupiter, there's a good thing about Capricorn because it kind of creates these limits for it. It kind of makes you grounded, makes you more like realistic in terms of your views, in terms of your what is fun and like enjoyable for you, what makes you really feel like you can expand. It's funny because Jupiter rules the stomach area, this area, so it's kind of close to the heart. So when we feel like our solar plexus is expanding and believe with this placement in Jupiter, a Jupiter placement in Capricorn, it feels like, are you sure that's what it is? So there's a part of you that's kind of like has to go through that. And what happens is that eh, being cautious about, you know, relationships or communities that could potentially be advantageous to you or can benefit you in the long run. It squares. There's a square placement to Ganymede Lucifer. It's almost like, so even though this is part of your journey, you're supposed to learn this, and it's something that you transform through. It's almost like the opportunity to really grow from this is kind of like being, in a way, hindered in a certain way, but it's being more about being realistic. Is when it comes to Libra energy is like a little bit more optimistic than Capricorn, a lot more, right? They actually there's a reason why Capricorn, even me when I'm like in relationships or, well, any Capricorn that I've ever met, we kind of don't get along because Libra wants connection. Libra wants relationships. Libra wants you, me kind of thing. Capricorn doesn't do that. Capricorn it isolates. It's the hermit of the zodiac. It's ruled by Saturn, which is considered the teacher. But there's this thing about that too. So, but Capricorn is very grounded and very slow and very paced and very disciplined, very focused. Which is funny because it's like Capricorn likes material things, which ties in with your second house thing, with your second house placement, which is ruled by Taurus. In this case, it's not ruled by Taurus, it's actually ruled by Aries, but it's still a Taurus house. So it's Earth, still Earth. And then Libra, the opposite side, likes also material things, but not so much. But it still enjoys it, it appreciates physical things. Beauty is really part of that. But it's more about you, me, and then it identifies with the beauty of relationships, the beauty of love itself. Very, you look at any love story is very much a Libra thing. And Capricorn is more about the business. Capricorn is more about career. Where are you going with this? What are you going to do with your money? Your vocation? Are you serious about life? Right. This is with the Jupiter placement here. It's again, so it's square that Ganymede Lucifer placement, but it's also square, I would say, as far as Phaethon, but mostly Hygiea and the moon, actually. Mostly the moon. No, it's actually the moon. It's square the moon. So, how that ties into this whole thing is that the moon here being in Aries, it's like it squares the Jupiter. So, it feels like there's a part of you that goes like, but I want to be free. But then Jupiter goes like, like you can expand, but let me watch out for you. It's very much kind of tied into the Phaethon thing because Phaethon was disciplined by Zeus. He had to be disciplined by Zeus, kind of brought back because he rode a chariot of Helios, his father. When he discovered that Helios was his father, he was getting there was this rebellious side of him that came out. It was kind of like acting out. He's acting out and acting out at the same time. He was basically saying, like, fuck you, I'm just gonna do this because I just realized, okay, I have all this power, but you were never there. So who are you to teach me? Who are you to tell me I'm supposed to be? Yeah. But Zeus decided to step in and intervene, and I think that was a story that he chastised and he basically reprimanded him. So he when Jupiter does that, or in this case, Zeus, when he does that, or when he in the mythology when he did that, it was to it's similar to when you're trying to uh, control global warming. That's a huge deal, right? Because Phaethon, like I said to you before, represents global warming because the sun becomes too close to the earth. So then he represents warming of the earth. Phaethon is the son of Helios, the sun. So there you go. So Helios, I guess Phaethon in this case rules heat, not necessarily the sun like burning, but heat itself. So, but he can carry the sun with him, and and sunrise, and UV rays. Phaethon rules UV rays as well. So, but that doesn't really tie in with this. I'm just giving you the analogy of it. That when it comes to Zeus here or Jupiter, is trying to control things and kind of putting control into your emotions, your natural habits, your desire to be more free, to have your own voice, your own autonomy. That's Moon as well. Moon likes to be natural. A basic need is like, when I'm hungry, I'm hungry. When I want money, I want money. I'm going to go get it. Nobody tells me what to do. Right? Aries is a very assertive, aggressive sign, but it's also very like doesn't like to be what it's like to doesn't like to be told what to do, specifically because Aries is a cardinal sign. Same with Libra too. Libras, any sort of cardinal sign, don't like to be told what to do. So this energy here, there's a sort of a this little thing that's happening here. One, Jupiter is controlling your emotions, your habits, your how you behave, eating habits as well, especially with money, eating in this case as well, eating habits of money, how you consume and use money. So, and Jupiter also here controls Ganymede and Lucifer. Watch your pride, watch your ego, watch your being controlled, watch being like taken for granted. This is Jupiter's going like, I'm going to create a bit of a boundary here because Jupiter doesn't rule boundaries, it rules expansion. But because it's in Capricorn, it's almost like, yeah, I'll help you grow, but Ganymede and Lucifer wants to just be free. Same with Aries, right? Phaethon wants to be. But Phaethon is not connected to the moon here, but the moon connected to Jupiter and Jupiter connected to Ganymede, Lucifer. It's that. So I said a lot there, but there are more things here. So you have Prometheus, Heimdall. So Prometheus, Heimdall square. Prometheus is actually 13 degrees. I'm going to go with that one for now. Prometheus in retrograde is almost like there's a party that goes, what is this one? Let's see here. It's in the fifth house. So the Prometheus is like beyond or below freedom, gratitude, or pride. So he rules foresight. He rules collective benefit. He's like Uranus, left versus right wing. He's a rebel without a cause, or rebel with a cause. Collective benefit, creativity, wisdom, writing, math, agriculture. So it's all about the benefit of people. In this case, because it's the fifth house, it's all the benefit probably like children, romantic relationships, um, anything that would benefit your specific, like what makes you feel good about yourself. Um, it's in the cusp of this. Your fifth house, the cusp is Gemini. So we go into Mercury with that one. But your Mercury is in Sagittarius. So that explains the whole um, There's a part of you that wants to just communicate, just want to relate and connect and have that thing with either any romantic relationships, maybe like flirtation, any sort of people that you meet, even with children, things you enjoy, you just want to do it. But because of Prometheus being here in retrograde, it's almost like you don't know how that will help people. You don't know how that it's kind of like you're punishing yourself for it. There's a part of you that continuously goes like, ugh, I'm punishing myself. I don't know how to be I don't know how to connect with people. I don't know how to connect like with my heart. That's part of Prometheus. Except it was his liver that was pecked on by an eagle, and it just grew back. Uh, but its liver back then, I think it was some certain cultures, liver represented the heart. It had the same meaning. They didn't know about the heart. They knew about the liver. So to them, the liver was the heart of the matter. Uh, so emotional healing is part of this one as well. So maybe being able to connect again and sort of find. Also, this has a lot to do with like just kind of like either doing things for your own sake and you think it's helping people, but at the same time it's not. So there's a kind of a doubt there because it's in retrograde, right? So it says it rules Prometheus rules your rebellion, trickery, lawlessness, authority, out of system or off grid choices, being a maverick, disobedience, rebelliousness, which it still ties in with the Sagittarius placement a little bit, Sagittarius, but also Pluto and Scorpio, but mostly Aries. Um, Humanitarianism that kind of ties with the Libra thing as well, but because it's in a square aspect. You have Prometheus, 13 degrees. It's actually square. Empath. As far as Dejanira, but Amphitrite. So again, Amphitrite wants to be like her own boss. She wants to be the queen of her own kingdom. She didn't want to get married. She wanted to be single. So here, that kind of does the same thing. When you have Prometheus in retrograde, it's almost like, but there's a part of it that's kind of does that. It's like you doubt that, where it's like, okay, well, I want to be myself. I want to, I want to connect, but I don't know. I doubt that. I'm not really sure. So you kind of continuously question. Um, I suppose you can say, what did I put here? You question whether you should go against the grain or not. Go by the rules, right? You question that. It's like that's part of you that's like, there's the rules, but that's where the Jupiter thing comes in, and that's where Prometheus here is showing that. Um, yeah, but you have here. I'm not sure if this really applies here, but what do you call this? It's called PO, plenty of fortune, plenty of fortune, something of fortune, part of fortune. There you go. Part of fortune represents natural skills you have. In this case, it's in Cancer, so being able to be nurturing, right? Kind of ties in with Cernunnos here. You have that natural ability. Hygiea is a little bit like that because it's like creating safety, right? And creating so you have that natural ability where you get, here it's more about children or people. Yeah, anything. This is the fifth house. Anything to do with your sense of like feeling of having like you want to have fun, you want to be present in the moment, and but you know how to kind of nurture yourself in this case. It's more towards yourself and people, even people around you. But with the Prometheus thing here, it's almost like you doubt that. Like, am I doing my job? Am I just being myself, or am I connect? So you see what I mean? There's that sort of disconnection, and so there's this feeling of like, I'm not connecting. My heart got pecked out by an eagle again. Oh. So that's Prometheus. But Prometheus learns from this stuff by gaining insight into past mistakes, gaining insight into, okay, maybe I should time this. Who should I relate with? Is this worth rebelling against? Is this worth keeping? Is this worth following? So this Prometheus is foresight. Ties in with the Libra thing, which is like about discernment as well. It's kind of timing things. Heimdall here is just square your north node. So Heimdall is yes, messaging. It's all about okay, enforceable boundaries and changes. So you see how there's boundaries here, which is the Cancer thing, but it's also foreseeable. So there's a part of you that can tell that, but again, you can't tell it because it's in retrograde here. It's almost like you don't know who. Maybe you kind of misjudge it because you do have your Mercury in Sagittarius. Sagittarius has a tendency to exaggerate and kind of go beyond, which is okay. But sometimes when it goes beyond and overreads things, um, that's when the doubt kind of comes in, and then you're kind of like, oh, darn it, you know, right? There's an inner part of you just like, oh, especially for Scorpio, that's kind of like, did I just make that mistake? What the fuck? I should know what I'm doing, right? But then there's that doubt, right? So Heimdall here shows that you question your ability to foresee things, being able to trust your intuition, trust clarity in your life. So it becomes a sort of like, maybe in a way, kind of triggers an unconscious behavior, right? Or rather, you have a hard time accessing these subconscious beliefs, maybe specifically pertaining to relationships or being just having fun and being present, being childlike, right? It's almost like you lost your sort of part of you lost your childhood, or part of you lost your innocence. Again, because of we have Phaethon there in retrograde. The zeal got lost in you because you're probably being chastised in a past life, or when you were younger, you're being told how to do this, how to do that. And you're just like, why can't I just be myself, right? So, but that's why there's doubts about hygiene too. There's doubts about that sort of like, we don't know. Okay, I'll try to be clean, but who says that? Where does that come from? Do I believe that myself? Is that part of my core? I don't know. Right? There's a part of you that does that. That's that. Sorry. But it's funny because you have Mercury also rules your fourth house. So there's a part of you that goes always doubting. Your core beliefs are always kind of like changing, right? You're kind of like going back and forth. Is this right? Is this right? Very by the mind. Part of your core beliefs is kind of over analyzing things and analyzing things and analyzing it. So it's hard to say that, but that's what I read in here. Okay, so uh Heimdall here in the fifth house, kind of like again foresight, bringing in the truth, which ties in with the Pluto placement you have. Recovery, that's also regeneration. So it's almost recovering from things that don't work out, relationships don't work out, whether it's people, lovers, or even just children. That's a very Earth. That's a very Leo thing. Leo is all about connection, your childlike thing, your sexuality, not necessarily sex itself, but that sort of like flirtatiousness, fun, enjoying relationships, right? The child in you and the child in others, and just connecting. It's not necessarily sexual per se, but kind of. Kissing, probably like flirtation, kissing, hugging. I don't know. As far as that, it's not. It's on more surface level, not like I'm just gonna enjoy the body. It's all super sexual, like porn, like. No, it's not. Leo doesn't really do that because it's more about the childlikeness, the eternal child. Um, so it's also having boundaries as well, just ties in with this one. Border guards, security guards, watchtowers, watch, defense, borders, boundaries, dividing lines, edges, limitations, limits, warnings, omens, signs, end of days, doomsday. So, because it's retrograde, it's not that you see that. It's more like you don't know where the boundaries lie. Because it's in retrograde, it's almost like you doubt where you put your boundaries. It's almost like, oh, maybe a part of you is just way too open. So you have to come to terms with that balance. Right now, when I said it, balance, North Node, Libra is about balance. So now you're being called to balance everything that you're going through. It's also we've talked about recovery. Um, it's all about recovery periods. Okay, that's part of that as well. With yeah, that's kind of ties in with recovery periods and being able to recover and heal. Not only that, but also through maybe the sport that you do because you're active, you have an active lifestyle. Um, and I do have to add this here because Heimdall had a story of sleeping with either gender. So Heimdall represents bisexuality, probably more than the others, other planets, other asteroids, kind of tied with Uranus. Uranus is also bisexuality. So not saying that you are, I'm not saying that people you meet are, there's a possibility. Yeah. Sexual encounters, which ties in with the fifth house here. That's interesting. Of course, affairs with strangers and or lovers. That's you know, but that's where you kind of doubt where the boundaries are, right? Opposite of all these asteroids here, you have Astraea, Frigga, yeah, Proserpina, Hybris, Echo, Thetis, Icarus. Risk taking. We talked about this before. That's Icarus, risk taking. Thetis. I'm getting tired here. Just to let you know, I'm not going to complete this section right here because it's not tied to your north node. But Thetis is physical and emotional transformations. Uh, Sacrificing emotions and basic needs. That kind of ties in with this one. And then echo is more about repetition, kind of probably be feeling forgotten. Hybris, excessive pride. That's a general just. Proserpina is kind of overly trusting and kind of and being kind of like adapting to situations, even if it's painful, even if it's loss, even if it's death, even if it's all that stuff. And it's growing when people grow to love you. That's Proserpina. You might hate them at first, but she's also here. Reap what you sow and sow what you reap. Right. Even though they're suffering, there can be gifts and blessings in those as well. So she's a positive side of Persephone. They're both kind of the same uh, archetype. And then there's of course Frigga. I actually finished that, finishing Frigga here. Resistance and release. So Frigga is all about. Uh, she was always kind of like she's kind of like always uh, guiding people and helping people, giving them messages, warning them. But sometimes it can be misinformation. So she's kind of discriminatory about what she gives in protection, the protection she gives, protectiveness. She's very biased. She's all about bias. She's a lot about bias, sorry, but she's also kind of the duality as well, multiple aspects of oneself. Dependence, affection, nurture, bonding, intimacy, closeness, sticking to each other. So very biased opinions and counsel as well. But she's very biased counsel, biased opinions, twisting someone's arm, ring, retching, meddling. Meddling is part of this one as well. Infringement, impositions. It's very Libra thing as well. Misinterpretation, exaggerations. Oh, that's the Mercury and Sagittarius there. Weeping, grieving, love and beloved, dear ones, relaying information, right? Seeking advice, counsel again, okay? In confidence, so trusting as well. That's why she's biased. She's like, I can trust. If I trust you, I trust you. If I don't, I don't, right? So that's the general gist of Frigga. Astraea is, I believe, ah, okay, so she's the one who believes in total justice. Where it's like, if one thing is not, if I'm not, she's kind of a resistant to chaos. She's all about if there's corruption, if it's not clean enough, it's not clear, it's not good, it's not whole, it's not holy kind of thing. It's almost like she leaves it behind. She kind of gives up, which actually is funny because that kind of ties in with the Sagittarian energy. And your ninth house is cusp is in Sagittarius. That makes sense why Astraea is there, because Sagittarius runs away from things that it cannot necessarily control. It just goes, "This is my philosophy. This is what I believe." Da, 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 da. And then, okay, I'm going to go this way. There's a reason why it's just like Gemini and Virgo and Pisces. It's a mutable sign. It's flexible. It kind of runs away. When I say run away, I don't necessarily mean escape, but kind of, because it's very flexible. It adapts. Right? Astraea, Frigga is all about adaptation. Proserpina is about adaptation. Hybris and Echo are kind of similar in a way that Hybris is not just pride, but Hybris is actually not just extreme pride, but yes, there's narcissism, but also rebellion, overreacting, overreaching, out of character, irrationality, insecurity, degradation, humiliation, self-deprecating, self-grandioseness, pompous behavior, steadfastness, aggression, which is kind of tied in with uh, Thetis here. I believe what did I say about Thetis here? Lying to prevent, avoid anger, conflict, rejecting, relenting, manipulation, persuasion, invincibility, invulnerability, nourishment, nurturing, impermeability, prophecies, delays. Um, okay. Oh, okay. So there. Yeah. Okay. So Thetis is about adaptation now in this case. Echo is also Echo is more about being forgotten, kind of being left out. Um, the mimicry as well. So it's kind of adaptation as well. Mimicry is a form of adaptation, right? So um, but uh, Echo is kind of like a self-doubt sort of feel because it's like you don't have your own voice. So because it's in the 11th house here, this kind of ties in with this whole how it ties in with your how it's square your north node and your south node and opposite of Prometheus and Heimdall. There's a lot of doubt. The overall picture here is with all the asteroids that I mentioned, is there's a kind of a doubt in yourself. There's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of are experiencing of self-doubt, and you kind of feel like maybe you have to copy what other people do. There's no sense of like, I'm sovereign, I'm autonomous, or I know what I'm doing. But when in the past life you've had, it's kind of like, ugh. I forgot to mention here, Alecto is in retrograde here. There's a part of you that doesn't know how to feel that necessary anger that Aries usually would like to express, and you kind of hide it in a way, right? The Electo placement conjunct your South Node here means in the past life you also didn't know how to be kind of use that energy of wrath, anger, vengefulness, and just like just really like angry energy and reusing that and repurposing it to something beneficial so that you can be free or at least feel free or at least have not be affected by it. But because of the Aries energy, there's also that being present energy. That's very Aries is the most present zodiac energy in the zodiac. So which ties in with the a lot of things here. The sun, the Leo ruled fifth house, which is childlike, the children, having fun and enjoying it. A lot of it is like you're kind of trying to figure out where your boundaries are in terms of who you open it to, who you close it to, who you trust and you don't trust, whether you should be in a relationship or not, or whether you should connect or not, or whether you trust people or not, or whether you should, how much of it. It's really what it is. It all ties back into the one simple thing that your North Node says balance. That's the main thing. But balance doesn't always necessarily mean that you have to always balance things. Balance things can include not balancing things so that things are balanced. Does that kind of make sense? I hope it does. So remember that Eris rules Libra. Eris is like, she tests people. She's a kind of like, just kind of like, okay, we're going to create imbalance so that you do understand balance. There's the shadow, right? You need to embrace the dark to embrace the light. How do you know there's light without the dark? How do you know there's dark without the light? Opposites, that's the way universe itself understand of itself, understand its consciousness, understand it's like, I know what it is now. Okay, I know my role, I know my purpose. That's how purpose is created. When you have splits, when you have fragmentation, you understand where to go. You understand that's how you grow and that's how you expand. How else do you expect to how else do we expect or how else does something expect to be expansion if you don't break it apart? right? If you have a puzzle piece and you just go like this, it's in one piece. If you didn't make it into a puzzle, it's just like this one piece of cardboard, then it's just going to stay there and it's not going to go elsewhere. There's no room for other things. Sorry, I'm using the analogy of the a puzzle, but before the puzzle is created. I'm sure that puzzles are created when they probably have this machine where they cut through it and they shape like that. But no, either way, the point is fragmentation actually creates expansion. Funny, right? But anyway, so allow yourself, the keynote here is allow yourself to be in that direction, which is funny because your Pluto is in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Sagittarius understands expansion. Exaggeration is part of that as well. You can make mistakes, and that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes and exaggerate, make mistakes, exaggerate. As long as you're making that, the mistakes are fragmentations. When you have fragmentation, you go, right? So I hope that makes sense. But I'm going to end the call right now. I'm going to end the call in this session right now. And I hope that makes sense. I hope that's helpful for other people who are, So hello, full moon. Yeah, that's actually the ruler of my chart. Just on a side note here. Not that it's anybody's business or it's whatever, but I think that's why I saw this picture of the moon. It's like, it's beautiful. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's my chart ruler. What is your chart ruler? I think Uranus. Uranus and Saturn. So a lot of limitations. Pardon me, I'm getting sleepy. Limitations and change. So that's the Aquarius energy. Your chart ruler is both. But let me see which one's actually stronger. Hmm. I think Saturn is here because from how I know I've sensed your energy, I feel like Saturn is stronger for you. The Saturn side of Aquarius, which is like um, conser- conservatism, a little bit conservatism, creating boundaries, a lot of fear, karmic stuff, learning as well because Saturn is the teacher, considered a teacher. Um, you know, discerning whether the results you get are actually results or are they consequences. How you choose to work with the energy is that Saturn. Saturn is either results or consequences. That's what I realized for myself. Like, oh, that's right. Because Saturn, yes, there's consequences. That's a karma, but karma doesn't necessarily have to be like karma as in like debt. Like, oh no, I may create karma. But that's how we learn from it. When I say consequences, it's kind of like what you heard from what Matt Schaefer was talking about, which is feedback. That is Saturn. When we work hard at something, when we stick and we just when we stay the path and keep going and keep going and going. And of course learn from this thing, not doing the same thing over and over again, but trying to changing it when it's necessary. That makes sense why your Aquarius rules the chart, or rather, in this case, Saturn and Uranus, that energy. The Uranus is still strong in your chart because Uranus is it's actually sextile Saturn, but Uranus is not it's squaring the other asteroids, but the one that's trine aspect to your sun is Saturn. Pluto's there as well, right? But Saturn is trying that, so it's a kind of a part of you feels a bit like that too. You're kind of Saturnian in feel as well. You kind of like kind of work hard. This is why when you go to the gym, you work hard at it, right? That makes sense. You have a lot of vitality that you work with. You work with that energy. That's why you're at the gym. That's why you're like a. I don't know if you're a gym bunny. You would consider yourself a gym bunny. Not to really attach yourself to that, but still, yeah, a healthy ego understands and appreciates that. Anyways, I keep digressing, but that's all for today. I hope that I hope you caught all the stuff I was saying. I have a tendency to do that. You probably know that. I talk fast because ideas come to me and just like I get these things and just like I just have to say it. Even if I've taken notes, this happens as well. But anyways, I hope this helps. I hope this gives you more insight and detail. But this time it's a little bit more recorded. If you do have any questions, let me know. I'll see you later. Thank you.